She heard her daughter-in-law measuring her bedroom walls while she lay collapsed on the floor. Ellen Rosewood, 73, didn't cry out. She waited, still and listening, as Lana walked over her like a rug. By week's end, Ellen rewrote her will, revoked the deed, and gave the house to the only person who had ever offered her soup without a question. Sean and Lana thought they were inheriting square footage. Instead, they inherited silence and a locked front door with someone else's name on the mailbox. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The first thing Ellen noticed was the cold of the wood against her cheek. Oak, well-worn, waxed to a muted sheen. She remembered waxing it herself after Robert passed, just to keep busy. Her body had crumpled without warning, knees buckling as if the floor had called her name. Her breath came shallow, slow, but her ears still worked just fine. I told you, I want the master. It's bigger, it gets light, and it has that closet, Lana snapped from somewhere near the kitchen doorway. Sean's voice followed, muted but tired. Can we not do this now? No, Lana hissed. She's not gonna need it forever, Sean. And we agreed. Once she's gone, we remodel. I already called the contractor. Ellen's fingers twitched, just enough to remind herself she was alive, conscious, listening. The pulse in her temple thudded steadily. She didn't open her eyes yet. Didn't want to. Footsteps approached, brisk and deliberate, heavier tread than Sean's. Then silence. Then the sound of a heel clicking against the tile as it stopped. Ellen opened one eye just in time to see Lana step over her, not around, not near, but over, without a pause. She pivoted in the hallway, aiming her phone at the far wall. We could knock that out and open the space, she mused aloud. Sean appeared seconds later, slower. He looked at Ellen's body, hesitated, then looked toward the door. Did she fall? Lana shrugged. She's breathing. Neither knelt, neither touched her. They resumed bickering, their voices fading into the dining room like background static. It took Ellen 3 more minutes to summon the strength to sit up. Her back pressed against the wall. Her left hand trembled as she wiped sweat from her lip. She could still hear them. The scrape of a dining chair, Lana's voice clipped and bright. And the wallpaper, God, we'll rip that out first. Then came the knock. 3 short, urgent raps on the front door. Ellen? Ruby's voice filtered through, clear and sharp. You okay? Door's open, Ellen managed, her voice brittle. Ruby stepped in with the quickness of someone used to emergencies. She took one look and dropped her grocery bag to the floor. Jesus, Ellen, how long have you been down? Ellen looked toward the dining room, where the voices still danced around her life like vultures circling bones. Long enough to hear what matters to them. Ruby helped her to her feet, gently, carefully, and guided her toward the living room. You should have called me. I didn't have time to fall properly, Ellen muttered, her voice bone-dry. I'll do it better next time. Don't joke. This could have been serious. Ruby's eyes scanned Ellen's face. You dizzy? Heart rate okay? Ellen nodded faintly. Just a drop. Not the first. Probably not the last. Ruby exhaled. You need a doctor. No. Ellen steadied herself against the arm of the couch. I need something else. They sat in silence for a beat, the kind that hums when too much truth wants to be spoken. Ruby eventually asked, What's going on with them? I heard shouting when I came up the walk. They're divvying up my house, Ellen said, like estate vultures, measuring rooms I haven't even vacated yet. Ruby blinked. You mean... Ellen turned her head slowly, eyes sharper than her voice. You know any discreet lawyers? Ruby didn't smile. She just nodded once. I know one who handled my sister's estate, quiet, sharp, never flinched. Ellen leaned back. The pain in her shoulder throbbed, but her eyes were wide open now. No more collapsing, no more being stepped over. Give me the number, she said, before they measure the attic for storage. The attic creaked as Ellen opened the cedar trunk where Robert's papers lived, not where Sean had ever looked, not where Lana even knew to. Dust floated like powdered ghosts in the sunlight, slicing through the roofline window. Her fingers brushed over the layers, old insurance folders, a Valentine's card from 1989, and then the envelope. Heavy paper. Blue ink faded but legible. She sat cross-legged on the attic floor, unfolding the document with care. Last Will and Testament of Robert James Rosewood. The names stared back at her. Sean Andrew Rosewood, sole heir, executor, inheritor of the property. Robert had believed in bloodlines, believed in family as a through line, even when Ellen had started to see something else. She read the document twice. The signatures, hers, Robert's, the witness, all strong and certain. Her name existed only as a co-owner who'd survive the property. There were no contingencies, no room for judgment or revision. Her stomach turned. Downstairs she could hear Sean asking Lana if they had oat milk for her smoothie. Lana groaned, "Use almond and stop being so precious." Ellen rose slowly, will in hand, and descended the stairs with the patience of someone who now saw every moment differently. She picked up the landline and dialed the number Ruby had scribbled on a torn notepad. A warm, male voice answered on the second ring. "Keegan Law," the voice said. "Mr. Keegan," she asked. "This is he. This is Ellen Rosewood. You helped my husband write a will back in, it must have been 2007. "I remember Robert," he said instantly. "Fine man. Always kept his folders too tidy." "Well, I've kept them dusty," she said, her tone clipped. "But the paper still stands. I need to talk about revising it." A pause. "Are we discussing amendments or something more complete?" Ellen looked toward the kitchen, where Lana was now humming off-key while chopping celery for a juice she wouldn't drink. Sean was scrolling on his phone, standing in front of the fridge like the food inside might change. "I'd like to revoke a promise," Ellen said softly. Another pause. This one respectful. "I can be at your home by Friday afternoon." "Make it Thursday," she said. "I'd like the ink to dry before the weekend." That afternoon, Ellen placed the will on the kitchen table, directly in Sean's line of sight. He looked at it once, blinked, and slid it aside like a coupon he didn't need. "You need anything from the store?" he asked, eyes still half on his phone. "No," Ellen said. "Just quiet." Lana, slipping on sunglasses by the back door, offered, "Getting a facial. Back by 5. If the internet goes out again, text the landlord. This house sucks for reception." Ellen didn't reply. The front door closed behind them with a loud, dismissive click. She poured herself a cup of lukewarm tea. Ruby arrived an hour later with a small tin of sugar cookies and a sharper eye than usual. "He's coming Thursday," Ellen said, sipping. Ruby lowered into the armchair across from her. "You want me here, in case it gets heavy?" Ellen folded the will back into its envelope. Her hands moved with certainty now. "I want someone new," she said. Ruby tilted her head. "New. Not someone who's seen me as a mother, or as a neighbor. I want someone who saw me on the floor, and still saw a woman, not a possession." The teacups clinked as Ellen set hers down. She didn't just want a witness. She wanted a mirror who didn't distort her. Ellen poured water into the kettle with hands steadier than yesterday's, though not by much. Her body ached in quiet pulses, hip to knee, elbow to palm. But it was the loneliness pressing against her ribcage that made her breath short. Outside, late winter light painted the bare trees in shades of pewter and bone. She picked up the phone. "Mariah? It's Ellen." A pause, then warmth. "Hi, Mrs. Rosewood. Everything okay? I was wondering, would you have time for coffee? Just here. Nothing strenuous." I promise. Mariah arrived less than an hour later, her cheeks pink from the wind, carrying a thermos of ginger tea and a small bag of scones. She always knocked softly, as if she respected not just the house, but the silence inside it. "Don't get up," Mariah said, already unzipping her coat. "I'll set this up. Just tell me where the mugs are." Ellen watched from her chair, eyes flicking over the way Mariah moved, lightly, efficiently, but not rushed. She didn't hover like Lana or sigh like Sean when asked to reach the top shelf. She asked how Ellen felt without checking her watch. She didn't see Ellen's fragility as a burden, just part of the furniture of aging. "I want to show you something," Ellen said quietly once they were seated. She pulled a manila envelope from the drawer beside her chair and set it on the coffee table. Mariah looked confused but didn't reach for it. If this is about more hours, it's not. Ellen opened the flap herself, pulled out the preliminary title amendment, and slid it forward. I've changed some things. Mariah's eyes skimmed the document. Then her lips parted and the color drained from her face. No, Mrs. Rosewood, I can't accept this. Your family— Ellen raised a hand. They stepped over me on the floor, Mariah. You helped me back onto my feet without needing to know what I'd left behind. Mariah's voice broke. But I didn't do anything for this. Not something this big. That's the thing, Ellen said, voice steady. You helped without expectation. You never asked me how long I had left. You asked if I was hungry, if I wanted music, if I needed shade when we sat outside. Mariah blinked fast, as if willing the tears not to fall. They're going to hate me. They already hate me, Ellen replied, but they never hated what I did. They hated what I still controlled. Later that afternoon, Mr. Keegan arrived with his briefcase and a thin smile. He'd aged since her husband passed, but the man still had an iron spine beneath his tweed coat. Ellen offered him a seat in the study and handed over the new paperwork. Keegan reviewed it carefully, nodding once, then asking, "Are you absolutely certain?" Ellen didn't look at Mariah. She didn't need to. "Yes. The people who counted my breaths don't deserve my walls." Keegan placed a new will beside the deed and said, "Sign both here and here." The pen in Ellen's hand felt heavier than it used to, but her signature flowed smooth across the page, not a tremble in the ink. Beside her, Mariah sat perfectly still, hands folded, eyes red, lips pressed tight in disbelief. When it was done, Keegan pressed the copies into a leather folder. "We'll register it, quietly. No notification needed unless required. That's still your right." "I don't need fireworks," Ellen said. "I just want them to find out after it's too late to behave differently." As Keegan stood to leave, Mariah took Ellen's hand, hesitantly at first, then firmly. "I don't know what to say." Ellen squeezed once, a slow, deliberate gesture. "You already said it when you sat with me that night in the hospital and held my hand even after I fell asleep. No one else stayed." The sun dipped lower, and the house darkened around them, but Ellen didn't turn on a single light. She was no longer afraid of shadows. Lana's heels clacked across the floor with the confidence of someone preparing for ownership, not mourning. She moved from room to room with her phone raised like a realtor on a walkthrough, occasionally muttering things like, "This wall could come down," or "Good bones if you rip up that carpet." Ellen sat on the porch, blanket over her lap, mug of chamomile cooling in her hands. Through the screen door, she watched Lana pause mid-hallway, the very spot where Ellen had collapsed not 2 weeks earlier. "This'd be perfect for custom shelving," Lana said, snapping a photo. "Something sleek, minimal." Sean hovered near the kitchen counter, thumbing the same chipped coffee mug he always used but never washed properly. He didn't say much. He rarely did unless prompted. Today, he looked down more than usual. "I thought you said we were waiting to list," he asked finally, voice low. Lana waved a hand. "I'm not listing anything, just getting ideas." "You want her leaving all this to chance? That safe's probably full of old insurance paperwork and doilies." Outside, Ellen's eyes narrowed. The air was cold but still. No birdsong. Just the distant scrape of Lana's measuring tape and Sean's soft, defeated sighs. Ruby appeared with a brown paper bag of groceries and a 6-pack of Diet Cola. "She at it again?" she whispered, following Ellen's line of sight. "Hallway this time," Ellen said. "Same one I was on when they walked past me." Ruby set the bag down gently. "They think this house is theirs already." Ellen didn't blink. Not for long. Inside, Lana opened cabinets, ran her fingers along molding, and made a list on her notes app. "I'll take the master. It's brighter. You can have the guest room and convert it into an office or gym." Sean blinked. "You mean, when Mom?" "When she passes, obviously," Lana snapped. "We're not kicking her out, Sean. Don't be dramatic." From the porch, Ellen leaned forward, slowly rising to her feet. Ruby touched her elbow, but Ellen shook her head. "I'm just going to make sure my safe's still locked." She walked with deliberate care back inside, passing the dining table where Lana had fanned out color swatches like cards at a poker table. Her hand rested on the paint sample labeled Bone White, tapping it with a smug rhythm. Ellen said nothing. She moved past them both and into her room. The door closed with a soft click. She turned the key in the drawer lock, knelt beside the floor safe and double-checked the dial. It remained untouched. Inside, the revised deed, new will, and a short handwritten note to Mariah remained in perfect place. She closed it with a long exhale, twisted the dial back to 0, and covered the safe again with the woven rug from her wedding anniversary trip to Maine. Back in the living room, Lana continued, "Once we knock down the dividing wall, we could open the kitchen right into the living room. Great for entertaining." Sean said nothing. He just stared at the hallway with tired eyes. For a brief second, Ellen wondered if he remembered the day she lay there, clutching at the floor for balance while they argued over brunch plans. He hadn't looked down then. He wasn't looking down now. Lana turned to him with a satisfied smile. "I want her room. Yours can be the office." Sean scratched his chin. "Okay, yeah." The envelope was cream-colored, thick and stamped with red block letters. "Personal only. Legal documents enclosed." It arrived on a Thursday morning, dropped through the mail slot like any other piece of correspondence. But Ellen knew what it carried. She had asked Mr. Keegan to send the duplicate here to be seen. She was in the kitchen when she heard the mail hit the floor. Before she could rise, Lana's voice echoed down the hallway. "What's this?" Ellen moved slowly, letting the kettle whistle just a beat longer before shutting it off. Footsteps approached. Brisk, entitled, familiar. "Sean," Lana called out sharply, "you need to come here. Now." Sean shuffled from the den, rubbing sleep from his eyes, as Ellen entered from the kitchen with her mug. Lana held the opened envelope in one hand, the documents trembling slightly in the other. "You opened something labeled personal only?" Ellen asked, voice even. Lana ignored the question, her face twisted with confusion, then fury. "Who the hell is Mariah Green?" Sean blinked. "Is that the aide?" Ellen sipped her tea. "She's the person who didn't step over me while arguing about my bedroom." Lana's mouth fell open. Sean looked at the papers again, pale now. "This is the new will." Lana shoved it at him. "It says the house goes to her. Everything else gets split between charities. This can't be legal." "It's signed," Ellen said, walking past them toward her chair. "Witnessed, filed, and fully intentional." "You can't just decide this," Lana shouted. "You're not thinking clearly. You're old." Ellen turned back slowly, setting her cup down. "You're right. I am old, and fully aware of what that means. I know who shows up and who walks away. I know what I heard while I lay on the floor. I know enough." Sean's eyes darted between them. "Mom, why didn't you talk to us?" Ellen laughed softly, one sharp exhale. "You talked plenty, I listened." Lana's eyes narrowed. "This won't hold up. I'll contest it. You're being manipulated." Ellen stepped closer. Her voice dropped just above a whisper. "You were supposed to be my family, not my vultures." She left the room, leaving Lana fuming in silence. By mid-afternoon, Ellen sat on the porch, blanket across her lap. The mail sat open beside her, the original envelope returned to its folder. Ruby dropped by with banana bread and wary eyes. "Storm brewing?" she asked, nodding toward the living room window. "Legal, emotional, or atmospheric?" Ellen asked. Ruby chuckled. "Probably all three." Inside, Lana slammed doors, stomped up and down the stairs, muttering into her phone. Sean kept disappearing into the basement and emerging with nothing to say. By dusk, the silence cracked. Mariah arrived for her scheduled visit, a short check-in and meds sorting. Her cheerful knock came as always. Twice, then a pause, then once more. Ellen opened the door to find her smiling. "Hey, Ms. Rosewood. I brought extra ginger tea this time. Figured we'd earned it." She stepped inside, set her bag down, and then paused. Lana was already standing in the entryway, arms crossed, face tight. "So you're Mariah?" Mariah blinked. Yes? Can I help you?" "You're the one she's giving the house to?" Lana hissed. "Is that what this is? You think you can just walk in and inherit?" Mariah's smile faded. "I didn't ask for anything." Ellen moved between them, steady as stone. She didn't know, until today. And if you speak to her like that again, I will revise the will to include a restraining order. Lana's jaw dropped. This is war, Ellen. No, Ellen said, soft but lethal. This is clarity. Mariah stood at the edge of the porch, clutching a half-crumpled tissue in her hand, eyes swollen from tears she hadn't meant to show. I don't understand. Why me? Ellen sat in her rocker, bundled in a flannel blanket, her hands folded like calm bookends to a storm. The breeze carried the scent of freshly rained earth, and the porch creaked softly beneath them. The early morning light painted the trees gold and trembling. Ellen tilted her head. Because you never asked for anything, you just showed up. Mariah blinked quickly, the tears threatening again. But this, a house? That's not a thank you. That's a legacy. I'm just your aide. No, Ellen said firmly. You're the one who brought me real soup when my blood pressure bottomed out. You're the one who sat with me through dizzy spells and bad days. You're the one who asked, "How are you feeling today?" Not, "How much longer do you think you've got?" Mariah exhaled sharply and sat down on the porch steps, head in her hands. They're going to hate me. They already hated me enough to wait for me to die, Ellen said, not unkindly. You? You just gave me something to live for again. The quiet stretched. The sound of wind chimes tinkled from the neighbor's yard, followed by the distant hum of someone mowing. Life kept moving, even as the center of Ellen's small universe shifted beneath her feet. I don't know what to do, Mariah whispered. Don't do anything, Ellen replied. Not yet. It's still mine. You just keep being who you've always been, and let them unravel themselves. Mariah looked up. I won't treat it like it's mine, not until it is. Ellen smiled, faint but real. That's why it should be. Later that afternoon, Ruby arrived carrying 2 mismatched mugs of chamomile tea and a tin of shortbread cookies wrapped in wax paper. She took one look at Mariah's puffy face and didn't ask questions. I told you she'd cry, Ruby muttered with a wink toward Ellen. Good people always do. They sat in the living room, the 3 of them, the past, the present, and the future, in quiet communion. Sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains, catching flecks of dust midair like old ghosts suspended in motion. Mariah glanced around, her eyes scanning the worn rug, the floral wallpaper, the framed photo of Ellen and her late husband at the Grand Canyon. This place has stories, she said softly. Ellen nodded. And now it has a sequel. Ruby sipped her tea, then set it down with purpose. You just gave someone a life, and you took back your own. That's not just kindness, Ellen. That's a correction. Ellen said nothing, but the tension in her shoulders, the kind that had lived there so long it had a name, eased for the first time in years. That night, the house settled into its usual creaks and sighs. Ellen watched a crime drama rerun while Mariah swept quietly in the kitchen. Just before turning in, Ellen checked that the new documents were still locked in the fireproof drawer beneath her bed. Next afternoon, Ellen received a letter. Lana and Sean filed a legal challenge for mental coercion. The envelope sat unopened on Ellen's kitchen table for a night, not because she feared it, she just wanted to enjoy her toast in peace. Next morning, when she did open it, the legal language was as dry and predictable as Lana's perfume. Alleged undue influence, compromised mental capacity, unfit to administer decisions in her own interest. Ellen let out a single dry chuckle and slid the papers across the table to Mr. Keegan. So this is the fight, she said. Let's make it fair. Mr. Keegan leaned back in the old dining chair, its legs creaking under a lawyer's weight and the pressure of decades of family resentment. They're relying on the assumption you've deteriorated. Our job is to prove you haven't. I haven't, Ellen said plainly, but I've documented it, just in case they were that stupid. And she had. In a cedar chest at the foot of her bed sat 5 spiral-bound notebooks, dated, indexed, and filled with notes in Ellen's unmistakable handwriting, appointments, medication regimens, snippets of overheard conversations, Lana saying, "Once she's gone, I want the claw foot tub out and an ensuite put in." Sean mumbling, "She'll leave us the house, she has to." Ruby helped carry the journals into the living room, stacking them beside Mr. Keegan's briefcase like kindling for a legal fire. "These go back 6 years," Ruby noted, "and I've seen her write in them. No confusion, just truth." Mr. Keegan opened the first one. He flipped past a grocery list, a medication chart, and a detailed account of Sean forgetting Ellen's prescription pickup 2 months in a row. "This," he said, "is gold." Mariah arrived next, hands shaking slightly, holding a manila folder to her chest. She didn't sit, just stood by the doorway, like someone visiting a grieving family. "I brought my logs, from every shift, and receipts. Text threads with Ellen, time-stamped photos of medications, laundry, meals I prepared. I didn't know I was documenting anything legal, but—" Ellen looked up from the table. "You were documenting care." Mariah swallowed hard, her voice thinning. "I didn't mean to make enemies." "You didn't," Ellen said without looking away. "They did." Ruby reached for the kettle. "We're not burying you, Ellen. We're building your defense." By the time Mr. Keegan zipped his case closed, it was heavier than when he'd come in. "They thought they were going to catch us flat-footed," he said, "but they walked into a courtroom with accusations. We're walking in with evidence." Ellen nodded, folding her hands. "They want to say I'm unstable. Let them. I've been steady longer than they've been decent." That evening, Ellen settled in the living room alone. The house was still, but not hollow. There was comfort in the quiet now, not loneliness. She read an old entry aloud to herself from 2 years ago. "Today, Lana told Sean I was dragging things out. My body may be slower, but my ears still work. I told Ruby that day, when someone waits for your death like a deadline, don't leave them your name." The journal closed with a soft thud, dust dancing in the lamplight. The landline rang. Ellen looked at the caller ID. Mariah Green. She picked up, but it wasn't Mariah's voice on the line. "Hi," came the hesitant tone. "This is Sean." Ellen sat up straighter. "You're using Mariah's phone?" "She left it at the clinic." I saw her name on a file and thought maybe I just need to ask you something." Ellen waited, silent. "I don't think you're well, Mom," Sean said finally. "You're not yourself. Can you just talk to me, please?" Ellen didn't respond. She didn't need to. She hung up slowly and unplugged the phone from the wall. The knock on the door was too soft for strangers and too insistent for friends. Ellen sat still in her recliner, watching the muted television with the sound off. The knock came again. 3 taps, a pause, then one more. She didn't get up. Eventually, the door creaked open. She'd left it unlatched, and they took it as permission. Sean stepped in first, holding a crinkled paper bag from the corner deli. Lana followed, clutching a cheap bouquet from the gas station down the road. The scent of day-old lilies and 2 sweet carnations filled the air before either of them spoke. Ellen looked over her glasses, unmoved. "You found the handle, I see." "Hi, Mom," Sean said, a little too upbeat, like they were here to deliver good news. "We thought we'd bring lunch," Lana added, voice sugary and stretched too tight. "Chicken salad, your favorite, right?" "My favorite is honesty," Ellen said flatly. Lana let out a brittle laugh, setting the flowers down on the counter without water. "We just thought, maybe, it was time to clear the air. We've all said things." Ellen didn't move. "Yes, and done things. Like stepping over a person lying on the floor." Sean rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting to the side. "It was just a misunderstanding. You were fine. Ruby got there. You didn't even go to the hospital." "I didn't need a hospital. I needed a family." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut the air. Lana finally took a step forward. "We're not trying to fight. We just think, what's happening with the will, it's not fair. We've been here. We've helped." Ellen stared at her. "Tell me, Lana, what was the name of the nurse who came twice a week?" Lana blinked. I don't know. We weren't involved in that." "Exactly." Sean jumped in quickly. "It's just, we thought we were part of the legacy. Dad, he always said we'd take care of the house, keep it in the family." Ellen's gaze didn't flinch. "Legacy isn't entitlement, it's memory, and mine's sharp enough to remember which of you told the bank I wouldn't last the year." Sean's mouth opened, then closed again. Lana stiffened. Look, if this is about feelings, we're sorry, okay? But this is real. Lawyers, paperwork, we're trying to keep things civil. Ellen finally stood. Her knees cracked, but her spine held. You're not here to be civil. You're here because you're scared, and you should be. Lana's face flushed. You're making a mistake. No, Ellen said, walking to the front door. I made one already. I let you live here thinking I owed you something. She opened the door. The cold March air swept in, brisk and full of warning. Lunch is over. Sean looked like he might say something else, but Lana grabbed his arm. Let's go, she muttered through clenched teeth. They left without another word, the flowers abandoned on the counter like an apology no one believed. Ellen locked the door behind them, double-checked the deadbolt, and then slid the chain across with a satisfying click. She exhaled, not with relief, but with finality. There would be no more visits. She walked to the kitchen and picked up the flowers. The stems were already wilting at the ends. She dumped the bouquet into the trash, petals and all. Later that evening, as the sun cast a quiet orange over the hardwood floor where she'd once laid ignored, Mariah knocked gently on the door, as she always did. Ellen let her in and smiled. You just missed a performance. Mariah laughed lightly, but her face tensed as she pulled a white envelope from her tote bag. This came to me. Certified mail. Ellen took it. The return address was from a private investigations firm out of Des Moines. Mariah's voice was low. They're digging. Ellen opened the envelope. Inside, a copy of a background check request with her name at the top. The report came in a manila envelope, thick and neatly sealed, but there was tension laced in the way it was slid across the desk. Lana snatched it up before the private investigator had even taken his seat. Is it enough? She asked, already peeling open the flap. Her nails were chipped, her voice sharper than usual. The PI leaned back in his chair at the corner coffee shop near downtown Cedar Rapids. His coat was still zipped. He hadn't even gotten a sip of his drink. Enough for what, exactly? She pulled out the printed dossier, eyes scanning hungrily. You said she might have debts, or bad employment records, anything that makes her look like a gold digger. The PI sighed. Mariah Green has no criminal record, no debt collection, no complaints from clients, steady employment, pays her taxes early, she volunteers at the library once a month. Lana's jaw tensed. Everyone's got something. He hesitated, then pulled a small voice recorder from his coat pocket. You said something in our first meeting. About Ellen being basically dead last fall. I kept the recorder running because I thought you might need context for your case, but it doesn't help you. It hurts you. She froze. You recorded me? I was protecting myself, he said, unmoved. You hired me to dig into someone innocent, and in doing so, you gave me a front-row seat to how your family actually works. Lana bristled. She's manipulating Ellen. Anyone can see it. He looked at her with something close to pity. Lady, you're the one who used the phrase, counting down the days. Back at Ellen's house, the winter sun streaked across the dining room table where Mr. Keegan sorted through folders of documentation. The voice recording was now part of the file. So was the investigation summary. Neither made Mariah look questionable. What do we do with it? Mariah asked softly, standing at the doorway with her arms crossed. Her cheeks were pale. Keegan turned a page. We file a counterclaim for elder harassment. That recording? It's more valuable than anything we expected. Ellen sat silently in the armchair, her face calm but deliberate. They hired someone to smear her, and all they smeared was themselves. Mariah's voice cracked. I never wanted this attention. I know, Ellen said, and that's why you deserve it. In a small room at the courthouse the following week, Mr. Keegan submitted the countersuit. The judge, gray-haired, unsmiling, took one look at the attached audio file, the printed transcript, and the brief summary of prior petitions filed by Lana and Sean, then asked just one question. Has this family attempted coercion or pressure against Ms. Rosewood outside of official filings? Keegan raised an eyebrow. They hired a PI to dig for shame in the life of a home care worker, and when they found none, they accused her anyway. The judge nodded once, noted. Back home, Ellen took a pen to her final estate copy. At the very bottom, in crisp black ink, she wrote a new clause. No contact is to be initiated posthumously by any disinheritee to the appointed beneficiary under any claim of moral, familial, or financial right. Ruby watched from across the table, sipping lukewarm chamomile. "That's cold," she said quietly. Ellen shook her head. "It's clean." Days later, the official letter came by certified mail, Court of Cedar County, stamped and signed. Ellen opened it with steady fingers. Petition to contest last will and testament of Ellen Rosewood. Denied. No grounds for incompetence or undue influence. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Ruby exhaled beside her. "That's it. You won." "No," Ellen said, folding the letter and placing it inside her safe. "I just stopped losing." Across town, Sean sat at the kitchen table, rereading the same letter with a blank stare. Lana stood in the hallway pacing, phone in hand, searching for new lawyers who'd return her call. "You said we'd get something," Sean muttered. She snapped back, "We did. We got cut out of history." Sean's voice didn't echo anymore. The heavy footfalls, the slamming cabinet doors, the impatient sighs that once filled the house like secondhand smoke, gone. And the silence left in their place wasn't peace. Not yet. It was space. The kind you don't rush to fill. Ellen stood at the top of the staircase, gripping the worn mahogany railing as she watched 2 duffel bags disappear through the front door. Sean didn't look back. Lana didn't speak, not even a passive-aggressive parting shot. Just silence. Defeat wrapped in denim jackets and scuffed luggage. A rusted SUV coughed to life in the driveway. Ellen watched it roll backward, down the street, past Ruby's mailbox, until it turned the corner and vanished like a stain being wiped clean. Inside, the air changed. Subtle, but real. Mariah arrived later that morning in paint-splattered sweatpants, a brown bandana tied over her curls. She brought rollers, brushes, 2 gallons of corn silk whisper, and no questions. "The hallway?" she asked softly, nodding toward the place Ellen had gone down. Ellen nodded. Time to reclaim it. They painted in silence at first. The scent of fresh latex filled the air, sharp, medicinal. Each stroke of the roller was deliberate, like writing over a story you no longer agreed with. The wall absorbed it greedily, wiping out memory or at least muting it. Ruby dropped by an hour later with iced tea and peanut butter cookies. She peered down the hallway and smiled. Fresh coat for a fresh boundary. Ellen dabbed her brush into the tray again. No more ghosts here. Mid-afternoon, the doorbell rang. Ellen opened it to find little Sophie, the freckle-faced girl from next door, holding a Tupperware box with both hands. "Mom said you like molasses cookies," she beamed, "and she said you're really strong." Ellen crouched down, knees popping. "That right?" Sophie nodded. "She said not everybody fights with fists." Ellen took the container gently. "Your mom's smart?" Sophie grinned, then ran back down the steps. The cookies were still warm. By evening, the hallway glowed. What was once the color of old dust now gleamed a soft, forgiving yellow. Ellen leaned against the archway, eyes resting on the fresh trim. No blood pressure monitor, no cane against the wall, no Lana. "Looks like new," Mariah's voice said gently behind her. Ellen turned. "Feels like it too." Mariah's mother came by for tea the next afternoon. A quiet woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair pulled into a bun and eyes that seemed to scan for warmth in every room. "She raised 4 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment," Mariah whispered before they sat. "She always made room." They drank peppermint tea and talked about simple things. Weather, baking, the best walking paths in the neighborhood. But something hung in the air like incense. Belonging, a slow, deliberate shifting of roots. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," Mariah's mother offered, her voice husky from years of teaching. "But she talks about you like blood." Ellen didn't speak. Just reached for the napkin in her lap and dabbed at tears that surprised even her. That night, Ellen sat in the armchair in her sunroom. A soft quilt around her shoulders. The hallway light was still on, casting golden reflections on the newly painted walls. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. "Mr. Keegan." She answered. His voice was almost amused. You sitting down? I'm 73, Keegan. I'm always sitting down. Well, he said, you've been nominated for Cedar Rapids Civic Legacy Award. Ellen blinked. For what? Outliving disappointment? For reframing it, he said. Turns out that's rarer than people think. Next day, Ellen tilted the magazine in her lap, light catching the glossy header, Quiet Women Who Rebuilt Their Names. There she was, page 32, second spread, gray curls soft at the edges, smile restrained but unmistakably earned. The photo was taken on the front porch, Mariah's hand resting lightly on the arm of her chair, both women looking straight into the lens like they weren't asking for permission anymore. The story wasn't dramatic. No scandal, no lawsuits mentioned, just phrases like uncommon dignity, clear boundaries, and intergenerational grace. I sound like a library, Ellen muttered under her breath. Ruby snorted from across the sunroom. You sound like someone they'll quote at their daughters. She held her phone up, angling to get another picture. This one's going in the church bulletin, whether you like it or not. Ellen rolled her eyes but didn't stop her. The quilt on her lap smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Beside her, a worn leather notebook lay open, hallway lessons scrawled at the top of the newest chapter. That title came easy. The words beneath it did not. She'd started the memoir not out of ambition, but memory. People forget what isn't written down, especially when it doesn't scream. Ellen wanted her truth recorded quietly, thoroughly, like Mariah's help, like Ruby's patience, the kind of legacy you don't inherit, but carry. Mariah knocked gently on the glass door and stepped inside, cheeks flushed. They asked me to speak. Ellen arched an eyebrow. Who's they? The community center, part of the legacy luncheon next month. Just a few minutes. You like microphones? No, Mariah said, sitting beside her, but I like you more. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady. You gave me more than walls. You gave me worth I hadn't even asked for. Ellen didn't reply. She just reached over, fingers brushing the back of Mariah's hand. They sat like that for a few minutes. A breeze rustled the porch chimes, soft and metallic, like wind-blown piano keys. Ruby left quietly, promising to return with homemade cranberry bread. Ellen leaned back and stared at the ceiling fan, its blades slicing through summer air. Her phone buzzed. The email preview showed one word, Sean. She stared at the name a full minute before opening it. Subject. Just wanted to say, we made mistakes. I made mistakes. I was scared and I listened to Lana more than I listened to you. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I hope someday you'll believe I loved you. No greeting, no closing, just the digital equivalent of a shrug passed off as confession. Ellen hovered her finger over reply. She imagined the words she could write, cutting ones, weary ones, even graceful ones. But none felt right. Nothing could untangle a heart that had chosen convenience over compassion for so long. She closed the email, moved it to trash, deleted it permanently. Across the room, her notebook still waited, half filled. She turned back to the page. Some people wait for apologies, she whispered, pencil poised. I prefer closure. Outside, Mariah's voice laughed with someone in the yard. Ellen caught glimpses of her through the window, waving to a neighbor, kneeling to pick up a fallen flower pot, then fixing it like it had always belonged. That's what legacy was, she thought. Not entitlement, not biology, not even history. It was stewardship. Who shows up when no one's watching? Who keeps the door open when the will is already written? The wind shifted. She scribbled a new line in her memoir. I gave the house to someone who asked how I felt, not what I'd leave. Ellen shifted the last pillow into place with a quiet sigh. The light in her bedroom had changed, not just in shade, but in feeling. What once was a room, Lana scouted like real estate, now felt like retreat. It didn't whisper what it would become someday. It rested, grounded in now. She'd moved the bed closer to the window so the morning sun would touch her before anything else. The nightstand now held fewer pill bottles and more small things: a coaster from Ruby's last tea party, the old hospital badge from her nursing days, and a black and white photo of her wedding day, creased at the corners, but still holding. A larger frame stood by the window, her husband, Roger, caught in a laugh she still heard sometimes when the radio crackled just right. She stared at the photo as she sat on the bed's edge. "You'd have liked her," she murmured. Mariah's voice floated in from the hallway. "You talking to me or the photo?" "Both," Ellen said. Mariah entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "This one has more cream. Yours." The scent of cinnamon and brewed comfort filled the air as Ellen took hers, fingers curling around the warmth. They sat together at the edge of the bed, neither needing to talk much. "He'd have liked you," Ellen repeated softly. "He had a thing for quiet kindness." Mariah smiled, touched but a little unsure. "Then I'll take care of what he left." It wasn't a promise. It was a posture, a vow made in presence, not performance. The silence between them was full, not awkward. The wind nudged the curtains inward like breath. Then Ellen's phone lit up on the dresser. Notification from Lana T on Facebook. Ellen didn't open it, but she saw the preview. It's funny how people forget blood when they're given a house. No tags, just drama, just enough venom to feed whoever still followed her, which, by now, was probably just spam accounts and old college sorority sisters who didn't remember her birthday. Ellen didn't reply. Mariah leaned in, having glimpsed the screen. "You okay?" "She's playing music no one's dancing to," Ellen said flatly. Mariah chuckled, then grew quiet. "Do you ever regret any of it?" "Not the decision. Just the fallout." Ellen thought about that. The answer came slowly. "Not regret. But I do feel the bruises. They don't go away. You just learn to move with them." Outside, the mail truck rolled by, tires crunching against loose gravel. Inside, the house felt sealed, but not cut off. There was something sacred about its hush, like it finally answered to someone who wouldn't tear it apart looking for value. Ellen stood with effort. "I've got one more thing to do." She walked to the hallway closet, pressed the side of a shelf, and revealed the hidden safe Roger had installed 20 years ago, before the surgeries, before the silence grew thick in the house. She tapped in the code. The door clicked open with mechanical precision. Inside, a tidy folder marked Final Deed, Green Beneficiary. 2 copies, both notarized. Ellen placed them gently in the fireproof box alongside a sealed envelope labeled "To Mariah," upon my passing. Mariah stood nearby, respectful, watching but not hovering. With a slow exhale, Ellen closed the safe door. The lock turned with a quiet finality. She pressed her palm against the cool metal. "That's the last time I open that." The letter from the county recorder's office arrived in a plain white envelope. Nothing fancy, no gold seal, no confetti, just truth printed in ink and law. Ellen slid it open with the back of a butter knife. Her hands didn't shake. Inside, on the official transfer confirmation, property beneficiary of record, Mariah Green. No middle names, no hyphenated allowances, no trace of Sean, no room for Lana. She stared at the name for a long time, the way one might stare at a tombstone, not out of grief, but to make peace with the finality of it. She placed the letter in her desk drawer, behind the insurance documents, and under the folder labeled "In Case." Then she stood, slipped on her shoes, and walked to the curb. It was warm for April, the kind of warmth that wrapped the skin but didn't weigh it down. From the porch, Mariah watched quietly, unsure what Ellen was doing. Ruby stood on her own stoop, arms crossed, lips turned up at the corners. Ellen opened the little green mailbox with its rusted flag and peeled off the aging sticker that had read "The Rosewoods" since 1987. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the clean new adhesive she had ordered 2 weeks earlier, and pressed it into place. "Rosewood Green House." All caps, centered, permanent. As she stepped back to admire it, Ruby walked over carrying a frosted bundt cake under a glass dome. "You're better than the post office," she said. "They take longer to process change." Ellen chuckled softly, brushing imaginary dust from the mailbox. "Just wanted the neighborhood to keep up with the records." Mariah joined them a minute later, eyes wide. "You changed it." "I made it honest," Ellen said. "This house outgrew the people who used to live in it. Time the name caught up." Ruby handed the cake over like a blessing. "Lemon lavender, for new beginnings." The doorbell rang. It wasn't Sean or Lana. Ellen knew that without moving. It was Sophie, the little girl from next door, holding a crinkled paper in two hands. "I drew something," she said, cheeks pink from sun or excitement, or both, "for your fridge." Ellen smiled and opened it gently. The drawing showed 5 figures in crayon: Ellen in a rocking chair, Mariah beside her, Ruby holding a tray, Sophie herself with a big smile, and a dog that didn't exist but looked friendly anyway. At the top, in Sophie's careful handwriting, "Miss Ellen's Real Family." Mariah's hand went to her mouth. Ruby let out a soft, tearful laugh. Ellen said nothing for a long moment. Her eyes traced every line, every mismatched limb and oversized smile, like they were reading her life back to her in language only innocence could write. "She got the window right," Ellen said finally. "Even drew Roger's photo." Mariah knelt beside Sophie. "You're quite the artist." Sophie grinned. "I can add your mom next time." Ruby chuckled. "That makes it official then." Later that night, the house was quiet except for the soft clink of tea mugs on coasters and the low hum of the dishwasher. Ellen sat at the kitchen table with Mr. Keegan, who had dropped by after hours. He glanced at the deed papers once more, then leaned back. "It's done. The law recognizes her fully." "She's earned it fully," Ellen replied. Keegan nodded. "They'll never understand it." "They don't have to," she said, reaching for her mug. "Understanding was never part of their blueprint." Keegan paused. "You know this might become a precedent, right? Legally, not just emotionally. You've made a statement. Loudly, even if quietly." Ellen looked out toward the hallway, the one they'd argued about, measured, stepped over her in. "It's not revenge, it's restoration." As Keegan left, he turned to ask something but seemed to change his mind. He gave her a small wave, and she returned it without standing. The night air was cooler now, the kind that carried truth instead of tension. Inside, Ellen hung Sophie's drawing on the fridge, smoothed the corners flat, and stepped back. The envelope arrived 2 days before Christmas, tucked between a holiday flyer for gutter cleaning and a glossy charity solicitation with fake handwriting on the label. Ellen turned it over once, twice. The handwriting was unmistakably Lana's, all slants and capital letters, as if even her penmanship couldn't compromise. Inside, a generic card with a watercolor pine tree and pre-printed text that read, "Wishing you warmth and peace this season." There was no personal note, not even a scribbled name, just Lana and Sean in the bottom corner like an afterthought. 2 days later, a second envelope arrived. Sean's. It was smaller. Inside, a plain white card. "Hope you're well. Merry Christmas. Sean." No mention of the year, no asking how she was, just obligation disguised as outreach. Ellen placed both cards on the kitchen counter and stared at them under the yellow glow of the pendant light. The old her might have felt something. Maybe sorrow. Maybe temptation to answer back. But the Ellen standing in that kitchen was the one who had been stepped over, redefined, and risen. She walked both cards to the fireplace and slid them in between last week's newspaper pages. No drama, no ceremony, just kindling. The neighborhood potluck that evening was held at the Watsons' garage, heated by space heaters and lit with mismatched string lights. The folding tables sagged slightly under crock pots, and tin trays filled with casseroles, dips, and store-bought pies. Mariah wore a red scarf her mother had knit, and her mother, Teresa, brought deviled eggs that vanished within minutes. Ellen arrived last, wearing her husband's old wool coat. It still smelled faintly of cedar and the memory of weekend drives. Ruby waved them over to the card table, where 2 spots had been left open like a small tribute. "About time," Ruby teased, shuffling the deck. "We need someone to keep Mariah's mom from cheating." "I only cheat at bingo," Teresa shot back with a wink. They laughed. Ellen hadn't laughed this way, low, honest, belly deep, in years. They played cards until the food cooled, and the laughter spilled out into the cold night air. Ellen lost 3 hands, won the 4th, and passed on the fifth, just to watch the others play. At one point, she looked around the garage, neighbors chatting, kids chasing each other in snow boots, Mariah tucking her mother's scarf tighter, and thought, this is legacy. Not blood, not title. Presence. As the crowd thinned and the last of the folding chairs clattered shut, Ruby leaned close. You know they'll try again eventually, she said softly. Maybe a birthday card, maybe Easter. They can try, Ellen replied, finishing her cider. But they're not knocking on the same door anymore. Ruby nodded. They'll keep knocking. Ellen smiled. Then I'll keep not answering. Back home, she climbed the stairs slowly, knees aching more from the cold than age. In her bedroom closet, on the top shelf, she pulled down a fireproof safe the size of a shoebox. Inside, she slid in a fresh folder, burgundy cardstock, labeled in her best cursive. To be opened when I'm gone. Inside the folder were 3 things: a copy of her will, a letter to Mariah, and a small photo, her and Mariah on the porch, with Ruby laughing behind them, snapped by Sophie. The letter wasn't long, but it said what needed saying. If you're reading this, then I am somewhere quiet. That's all I ever wanted in the end. Quiet, and the knowing that I left something better behind. You made this house a home before it was ever yours. I watched you do it. That's why it is. Ellen clicked the safe shut and turned the lock. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel spiteful. What she felt was finality, the kind that hummed beneath the skin like heat from a well-laid hearth. Ellen capped the pen with slow fingers, letting the ink dry as if it mattered more than usual. It didn't matter that the memoir was typed and printed. It didn't matter that Mariah had offered to format it digitally, make it look official. The last page, just this one, had to be handwritten. She slipped the single sheet inside the back cover and closed the binder softly. The title, embossed in gold foil, read, The Hallway Lesson, What I Saw from the Floor. She sat with the book resting on her lap like a warm loaf of bread, fresh from a life that no one else had baked. The house around her breathed its usual rhythm, creaks in the baseboards, wind rubbing gently against the windows. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was honest. She reached for the manila envelope resting on the coffee table, slid the book inside, and sealed it. In blocky black ink, she wrote, For Mariah. Outside, through the clean pane of the front window, Sophie's laughter rose like a chime in the breeze. The little girl darted across the lawn in a red hoodie, jumping between patches of late spring sunlight. Mariah stood by the oak tree, hands on her hips, pretending not to see the snowball Sophie was packing with mischief. I see you, Mariah said, laughing, then ducked behind the tree too late. The snowball hit her in the shoulder. Both of them collapsed into laughter. Ellen rested her chin on the back of her hand and watched through the glass. No tension, no watching the clock, no waiting to inherit, just living, just now. Ruby walked up the porch steps carrying a brown paper bag and nudged the door open with her elbow. Fresh rolls from Millie's, still warm. You spoil me, Ellen said, smiling. Ruby shrugged. You rewrote the ending, sweetheart. Least I can do? They sat by the fireplace, legs covered in quilted throws, the warmth of the rolls mingling with the scent of rosemary in the air. Ruby glanced at the sealed envelope on the table. That it? Ellen nodded. It's not just about the house. It's about what they couldn't take. They tried to turn me into an expiration date. Ruby looked out the window. And instead, you left them behind. The sun angled lower, casting amber streaks along the walls. Ellen walked the hall slowly, fingertips grazing the smooth drywall. The paint Mariah helped her roll on weeks ago was still pristine. Not a chip, not a scuff. The hallway. The place she'd once been left crumpled, barely breathing, half listened to, spoken about like inventory. Now it was just a hallway again. Not a grave, not a countdown clock. Just a path from one room to another, lit by peace and memory. That night, after Mariah and Sophie had gone, and Ruby had taken her rolls home in foil, Ellen stood at the kitchen sink with a single glass of water. The faucet still squeaked, the floor tile still popped when she shifted her weight. She loved those flaws now. They made the house breathe. She took the envelope to the fireproof safe and tucked it next to the letter marked, to be opened when I'm gone." Then she shut the metal door, turned the dial, and pressed her palm to the cool front like a benediction. Nothing left to change. Nothing stolen. The next morning, Sophie recited a short poem during Grandparents' Day at school. Ruby had driven Ellen to the auditorium, and they sat in the third row, watching the little girl adjust her headband and step to the mic. She cleared her throat, nervous. Then began, "She never asked for thanks, but I'm giving it anyway. She gave me cookies, warm socks, and a quiet place to stay. She gave me a porch swing, a garden, and a story each week. But mostly, she gave me a home without ever needing to speak." Ellen didn't cry, but she held the armrest so tightly her fingers ached, and when Sophie finished, looked at her in the crowd, and smiled. Ellen smiled back, whole. Back at home, she sat on the porch as the sun climbed high. No voices behind her arguing over space, no footsteps measuring her exit. Just a breeze, just the locket of warmth that comes when something has been done the right way, at the right time, by the right hand. Ruby brought iced tea. Mariah returned from work and sat on the step. Sophie curled on the porch swing with a book, and the house, her house, was still standing, freer than it had ever been.